just as I expected.
Sasuke triumphed in the battle. Itachi Uchiha is now dead. Itachi Uchiha is now dead.
trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would be made stronger in the presence of my Savior.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and good morning, good morning, good morning. I gotta tell you, I had the itch to just wake up and start going live today, and I miss that feeling. So I'm very blessed, very thankful. Um, let's start off how we are going to start off every single stream. Just a word of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for this time, for this day. I ask that you continue to open up our hearts and that we just seek you in ways that build a relationship with you. Lord, I thank you for this platform that we can glorify you in all that we do. I ask that we just see how vital it is to have victory in you. Lord, for those who are having stressful, anxious, and otherwise just consuming days, Lord, I ask that you replace that with peace, with love, and with your spirit. Lord, I'm just so grateful for the trials, for the valleys, and for the mountains that you allow us to reach. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So, thank you all to recently followed as well. Chris Bonsai, Neon Lotus, Audic TTV, Dave Streams, Black Talon, uh, Katia Sadia, and Kamez. Hey, oh yeah, dude. Thank you, man. That was awesome. It was so good seeing you and doing your stream the other day. That was sick. So, the schedule is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Saturday. It really depends on how my wife's schedule is as well. And what fell out? Yeah, okay. All right. Uncrustable. I am such an Uncrustable lover. I can't get away from these suckers. That's honestly gonna be my lunch. I don't really require a whole lot, and do not be like me. Your body needs fuel. Your body needs the glucose. Everyone's different. I do want to recap what I read in my latest readings, which I wasn't sure if I was gonna be able to continue, or I said I didn't know if I was going to, but I did read Joshua 19 through 21. So I'm gonna put a pause a little bit to El Musica. I'm gonna fade it out. We'll get back to it. Did a lot of other stuff off stream, so little things, little touches that are gonna make this a lot better. Always open for comments and suggestions, please, and thank you. So diving back into Joshua, it's not the most exciting time, as we're literally just drawing out and plotting out all of this land for the ancestors. And putting myself in their shoes, I get it. I would be anxious, like, I haven't gotten my plot of land yet. I've been promised this for the Lord knows how long. Like, so context is huge. Always, 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 always. So we had left off with finishing Joshua 18. So now we're going into Joshua 19 through 21. The Bible recap done by Tara Lee Cobble. Beautiful, beautiful book to help summarize. So I'm gonna quickly go over that, and then we'll go over our next three readings, which is 22, 23, and 24. So Joshua 19 and 21. Today we continue looking at the land allotments for the tribes. They've been waiting 40 years for this. They've been fighting for this quite literally. Their assignments are where they'll build their lives and raise their families. And for the Israelites, this isn't a temporary placement. This land is marked out to be the home of their tribe forever, provided they keep up their end of the covenant promise they made with God. Since many of the ways these places are referred to in Scripture mean nothing to us, I'll offer a short description of each place we see today. Imagine you're one of the 7 tribes who hasn't gotten their land yet, and you're waiting to find out where your family will live. That's the context you want to be a part of. Simeon gets assigned land in the middle of Judah's plot of desert in the south. Zebulun gets a tiny plot in the north. It's the smallest plot besides Benjamin's, but it is lush. There's a green area with lots of plants and flowers. And if you look at the map, you may notice that Zebulun gets the city of Bethlehem. But that's a different Bethlehem from the one where Jesus was born. There are 2 Bethlehems in the Promised Land. He was born in the one just outside of Jerusalem. Issachar also gets a small fertile land near the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River. Asher gets the Mediterranean coastline to the north, some of which belongs to the Lebanon of today. Naphtali gets the mountainous north, including a mountain range that reaches over 9,000 feet high. And you can ski there if you visit Israel in the winter. And the people from the tribe of Dan get a gorgeous coastline near the area, near a major port called Joppa, Joppa, which is adjacent to the modern day Tel Aviv. But Dan loses this land later and they relocate to a part of Naphtali's plot in the south. So we'll stay tuned to find out how and why that happens. The plot of land where they eventually relocate is a gorgeous nature preserve today, covered with trees and rivers and wildlife. Both of the places where Dan lives are prime locations, but they're kind of a terrible tribe, and we'll see that later. I don't remember the tribe of Dan, so this I'm unfortunately excited to see where that goes. So that's that land we were talking about. And since Joshua was one of the two spies who believed God 45 years earlier, he gets to choose where he wants to live. And like a gentleman, he lets everyone else get their land first. He chooses a hilly area in Ephraim's land, just south, just north of Jerusalem, in a somewhat isolated area. And Joshua knows his years are drawing to a close, so he chooses a good spot for quiet and solitude. The topographical diversity of this little nation is shocking. It may only be the size of New Jersey, but it covers a wide range of climates and altitudes, from snow-capped Mount Hermon to the lowest spot on Earth, the Dead Sea, which 1,400 feet below sea level. Land allotment determines nearly everything about the lives of the Israelites. Their climate, their serenity, the food available to them, their job opportunities, and how far they have to travel to get to the tabernacle in Jerusalem, their future capital. Life for a Simeonite in the southern desert would be the opposite of life for a Benjamite who lives in a city in the mountains of Jerusalem, or for a Naphthalite who wakes up to flowers and palm trees along the Sea of Galilee, or for a Manassite who watches the sunset over the Mediterranean Sea every night. After the land is distributed, it's time to set up the cities of refuge, the areas where a manslayer, someone who accidentally kills someone, that's the definition of the manslayer, can live without fear of retribution. Cities of refuge are less like prisons and more like safe houses, but a manslayer isn't allowed to leave until a high priest dies. God intentionally spreads the cities of refuge throughout the tribes so that a manslayer will have a good chance of reaching one of them before someone tries to retaliate. God thinks of everything, and the Levites are also distributed among the tribes, kind of like local pastors. And she always ends with a God shot. So God shows us so much of his character in accomplishing all this for the Israelites. Not just generosity and faithfulness, but strength, power, and persistent love, forgiveness and grace and mercy. God ushered them into this promised land despite themselves. He has given them everything they need, but mostly important of all is himself, because he is where the joy is. All right. If there's no questions about that recap, we're going to move on to Joshua 22 to 24. I'd like to take other questions. I don't think I'm going to open up the Discord yet. I got to remember, I haven't had a a social media in about 4 years. So keeping up with all of this again has been a task, and I knew it was. I knew it was going to be difficult, and I'm having fun. I'm genuinely having a wonderful time. It's just the nuances of all of that. So I'm being challenged to, you know, open up not Twitter, but Blue Sky. Seems like that's getting a lot of traction. I'm still on the fence about TikTok. I know it's really helpful for new streamers, new live, new content, new art. So I should probably swallow my pride, and as I'm trying to build this business for God, I probably should do it. I've answered my own question, haven't I? So I will drop more of those links in the Twitch bio, and like every single platform will have links to the others. I want to make that as seamless as possible. I know from like a user perspective, I need that. I would like that to be as help. I want to be as helpful as possible to make it as easy as possible to stay updated on what's going on. So let's go ahead and jump back into Joshua 20 verses chapters 22 through 24. And after that, I think I've got a pretty good CE course. We'll touch base on some of that in a minute. So Joshua blesses the tribes that live east of the Jordan River. Joshua summoned these tribes of Reuben and Gad and half of the tribe of Manasseh. He said to them, "You have done everything the Lord's servant Moses commanded you. You have also obeyed me in everything I commanded you. All this time, to this day, you have never deserted your relatives. You have carefully kept the commands of the Lord your God." Let's actually go ahead and full screen this. I'm missing it, aren't I? Bing, bing. Cool. Now, the Lord your God has given your relatives peace, as he promised them. So return home to the land that is your own possession. It is a land that the Lord's servant Moses gave to each of the Jordan River. Carefully follow the commands and teachings that the Lord's servant Moses gave you. Love the Lord your God, follow his directions, and keep his commands. Be loyal to him and serve him with all your heart and soul. Then Joshua blessed them. He sent them on their way, and they went to their homes. So this is all after the Sermon on the Mount. No, not the Sermon. The Ten Commandments. This is all that the Ten Commandments have been written twice at this point. The first set of tablets broke. They were written again. Here we are. Moses had given land to Bashan as an inheritance to half of Manasseh, and Joshua had given the other half of the tribe their land with the relatives west of the Jordan. When Joshua sent them home, he blessed them. He also said to them, "Return to your homes with your vast wealth, large herds of livestock, silver, gold, bronze, iron, and loads of clothing. Divide the loot from your enemies with your relatives." And here we go. An altar for God is built east of the Jordan River. So the tribes of Reuben and Gad and half of the tribe of Manasseh left the rest of the Israelites at Shiloh in Canaan. They returned to Gilead, and this was their own possession, which they had captured as the Lord had instructed them through Moses. Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh came to the region of the Jordan that was still in Canaan. They built an altar by the Jordan River, and the altar was very large and highly visible. The rest of the Israelites heard about it and said, "See there, Reuben, Gad, and half the other tribe of Manasseh have built an altar at the border of Canaan. It's in the region near the Jordan River on the Israelite side." When the people of Israel heard about it, the whole congregation of Israel gathered at Shiloh. I'm gonna Shiloh. They intended to wage war against them. Oh, lovely. The Israelites sent Phinehas, son of the priest Eleazar, to the tribes of Reuben and Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh and Gilead. 10 leaders, one from each tribe in Israel, went with him. Each man was a leader of the household and head of the family division in Israel. When they arrived, these leaders said to the people of Gilead, "All of the Lord's congregation is asking, 'What is this faithless act you have committed against the God of Israel? Today you have turned away from following the Lord by building an altar for yourselves. Today you have rebelled against the Lord.'" Usually a big no. Does the sin we committed at Peor mean nothing to us anymore? Didn't we cleanse ourselves from it? Because of that sin, there was a plague on the Lord's congregation. You have turned away from following the Lord. Today you rebel against the Lord, and tomorrow he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel. If your land is unclean, concurs to anything that Moses' teaching says is not presentable to God, come over here to the Lord's land. The Lord's tent is standing here. Take some property for yourselves among us. Don't rebel against the Lord or against us by building an altar for yourselves in addition to the altar of the Lord our God. Didn't Achan, son of Zerah, act faithlessly with the things claimed by the Lord? Didn't the Lord become angry with the whole congregation of Israel? Achan wasn't the only one who died because of his sin. Then the tribes of Reuben and Gad and half of the tribe of Manasseh answered the heads of the divisions of Israel. They said, "The Lord is the one true God. The Lord is the one true God. He knows, so let Israel know. If our act is rebellious or unfaithful to the Lord, don't spare us today." If we built an altar with the intention of no longer following him, and if we built it for making burnt offerings, grain offerings, or fellowship offerings, let the Lord punish us. Many books ago, they were being very specific on how these altars to be built, how the altar, like how the offerings have to be, and of course these offerings have to be to God specifically. A lot of incredible detail in the Old Testament. We were worried because of the situation we're in. We thought sometime in the future, your children may say to our children, "What relationship do you have with the Lord God of Israel?" The Lord has made the Jordan River a dividing line between us and you, the descendants of Reuben and Gad. You have no connection with the Lord. So your descendants would stop our descendants from worshiping the Lord. And then we said, "Let's build an altar for ourselves. It will not be for burnt offerings or sacrifices, but it will stand as a witness between us for generations to come. It will stand as a witness that we may worship in the presence of the Lord with our burnt offerings, sacrifices, and fellowship offerings. Then your descendants cannot say to our descendants, 'You have no connection with the Lord.'" So we thought if this is the statement, we thought if this statement is made to us or to our descendants in the future, we will answer. Look at the model of the Lord's altar our ancestors made. They didn't make it for burnt offerings or sacrifices, but to stand as a witness between us. It would be unthinkable for us to rebel against the Lord or to turn back today for following the Lord by building an altar for burnt offerings, grain offerings, or sacrifices in addition to the altar of the Lord our God that is in front of this tent. When the priest Phinehas and leaders of the congregation and the heads of the division of Israel heard what the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh said, they were satisfied. Then Phinehas, son of the priest Eleazar, said to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, "Today we know the Lord is among us, because you did not commit an unfaithful act against the Lord. Now you have rescued the people of Israel from the Lord's punishment." genuinely a big miscommunication, misunderstanding. Stand by. My boy, Gunson. Can't take the phone call, homie. We're live, my guy. We're live. Love you. Okay. Then Phinehas, son of the priest Eleazar, and the leaders returned from Reuben and Gad and Gilead to Israel in Canaan and gave them the report. The people of Israel were satisfied with the report, so that they praised God and didn't talk anymore about going to war against Reuben and Gad and destroying the land that they were living. Good full stop once they had the full story. The tribes of Reuben and Gad gave the altar a name. Witness between us and the Lord is the only true God. Oh no, my middle mouse wheel button is dying. Unfortunate. All right, next chapter. A reminder to follow Moses' teachings, or Joshua's final words in Israel. Again, we've got New Living Translation and God's Word. I find God's Word to be really easy for me to understand. I also have a study Bible in the English Standard Version. Nothing wrong with the King James or the American Standard Version. Nothing wrong with them at all. At least to my knowledge. When we come down to translations and how they've been handed down and how meticulous that these manuscripts had to be, even way back when, and the congregation of people coming together to make sure that these were properly done. Like, you couldn't have a comma or a period out of place. It was incredibly meticulous. Everything had to be objectively correct, as the authors of all of these books were given not only there are eyewitness accounts in some of these books, there are accounts of God-given wisdom, so on and so forth. Again, I am not a perfect theologian. I like to think that I know enough to be dangerous, is what my dad says. So let's have a reminder on to follow Moses' teachings in Joshua chapter 23. A long time afterward, the Lord gave the Israelites peace with all their enemies around them. Joshua was old, near the end of his life. Remember where he decided to be? Very nice little area. So he called all the leaders, chiefs, judges, and officers of Israel together. He said to them, I am old, near the end of my life. You have seen for yourselves everything the Lord your God did to all those nations. The Lord your God fought for you. I have given you the territory of the nations that still remain as an inheritance for your tribes. This includes the territory of all the nations I have already destroyed from the Jordan River westward to the Mediterranean Sea. The Lord God, the Lord your God, will expel them right in front of your eyes and force them out of your way. You will take their land as the Lord your God told you. Now you must be very strong to keep and to do everything written in the book of Moses' teachings. Don't turn away from them. Don't get mixed up in the nations left in your territory. Don't ever mention the names of their gods or swear an oath to them. Pure allegiance to God the Father. Don't ever serve their gods or bow to them. But you must be loyal to the Lord your God as you have been until now. The Lord has forced important and powerful nations out of your way. Not one person has ever been able to stand up to you. One of you used to chase 1,000. That was because the Lord your God was fighting for you, as he had promised you. Be very careful to love the Lord your God. But if you turn away and go along with the other nations within your borders, if you intermarry with them or associate with them, you should know that the Lord your God will never again force these people out of your way. Instead, they will be a snare and a trap for you, a whip laid at your sides, the thorns in your eyes until none of you are left in this good land that the Lord your God has given you. Pay attention, because I will soon die like everyone else. Again, Joshua speaking. You know with all your heart and soul that not one single promise which the Lord your God has given you has ever failed to come true. Every single word has come true. Every good word the Lord your God has promised you has come true for you. In the same way, the Lord will bring about every evil curse until he has destroyed you from this good land that he has given you. When you ignore the conditions placed on you by the Lord your God and follow other gods, serve them and bow down to them, the Lord will be angry with you. Then you will quickly disappear from the good land he has given you. So, ignore the conditions or covenant. Covenant, again, promise. So, context here, there's a reason why we call him Father. It's a really good representation of, regardless of your your own family status, a father is called to be a part of your life. A father is there to care for you, shepherd you. That's what God the Father is doing. And he has shepherded these people since the time of Abraham. This is the family tree is, oh my, it's pages long at this point. And so, in a sense, put yourself in the shoes, right? If your offspring were to, defile you or stray away from you, you'd probably get upset too. You told them specifically, hey, don't touch the dessert. It's not time yet. And what do? They go ahead and touch the dessert. Of course, you're going to get a little upset. Not exactly the same thing, but a nice little correlation to be able to see and frame your mindset around what's going on with these conditions, with this covenant, with this promise that he is, again, time and time and time and time again. I'm actually gonna, where is it? Where? It's very, very at the beginning, right? Am I just missing it? There we go, yeah. Um, the Lord, every single word has come true. Every single word. It's over and over and over and over and over. I personally, come on, can I put, sure, we'll put it in blue. I'd like to put it in pink. It's my favorite color, but moving on. Okay. Last chapter for today's Bible in a year. Honestly, I could put that, right? How about we do, why not? Bible in a year, day 88. Cool. I'm down with that. That helps. Okay. Joshua adds an agreement to the book of God's teaching. So the Lord's covenant renewed. I'm curious. What's Joshua? What's he doing? Because Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel together at Shechem. He called together Israel's leaders, chiefs, judges, and officers, and they presented themselves to God. So another new meeting. Joshua said to all the people, "This is what the Lord God of Israel says. Long ago, your ancestors, Terah and his sons Abraham and Nahor, lived on the other side of the Euphrates River and served other gods." This is true. You can go back and read. But I took your ancestor Abram. This is God, Joshua saying what God is saying. But I took your ancestor Abraham from the other side of the Euphrates River, led him through all of Canaan, and gave them many descendants. I also gave him Isaac. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I gave Esau the mountains in Seir as his own. However, Jacob and his sons went to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I struck Egypt with plagues. Later I led you out, and when I led your ancestors out of Egypt, you came to the sea. The Egyptians, with their chariots and horsemen, chased your ancestors to the Red Sea. When your ancestors cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians. He made the sea flow back and cover them. You saw for yourselves what I did to Egypt. Then you lived in the desert for a long time. After I brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived in the east side of the Jordan River, they fought you. However, I handed them over to you, so you took their land, and I destroyed them in front of you. Then Balak, son of King Zippor of Moab, fought Israel. He summoned Balaam, son of Beor, to curse you, but I refused to listen to Balaam. All he could do was bless you, so I saved you from his power. This is a wonderful recap of what's going on. This is great. Then you crossed the Jordan River and came to Jericho. The citizens of Jericho, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, Hittites, Girgashites, Hivites, Jebusites fought you. There's so many people that they had to go through, and God continued to provide. It's wild. But I handed them over to you. I sent hornets ahead of you to force out the two kings of the Amorites ahead of you. These things didn't happen because of your battle skills or fighting ability. So I gave you a land that you hadn't farmed, cities to live in that you hadn't built, and vineyards and olive groves that you hadn't planted. So you ate all you wanted. Joshua talking now. Fear the Lord and serve him with integrity and faithfulness. Get rid of the gods your ancestors served on the other side of the Euphrates River in Egypt, and serve only the Lord. But if you don't want to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. If you choose the gods of your ancestors served on the other side of the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live, my family and I will still serve the Lord. Still, freedom of choice. You're free to choose. I'm certainly convinced, even at this point, serve this Lord. The people responded, it would be unthinkable for us to abandon the Lord and serve other gods. The Lord our God brought us and our ancestors out of slavery in Egypt. He did these spectacular signs right before our eyes. He guarded us wherever we went, especially as we passed through other nations. The Lord forced out all the people ahead of us, including the Amorites who lived in this land. We too will serve the Lord because he is our God. But Joshua answered the people, since the Lord is a holy God, you can't possibly serve him. He is a God who does not tolerate rivals. He will not forgive you rebellious acts and sins. If you abandon the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you. He will destroy you, although he has been so good to you. The Lord answered Joshua, no, we will only serve the Lord. Joshua said to the people, you have testified that you have chosen to serve the Lord. They answered, yes, we have. Get rid of the foreign gods that are among you. Turn yourselves entirely over to the Lord God of Israel. The people replied to Joshua, We will serve the Lord our God and obey him. That day, Joshua made an agreement for the people and set up laws and rules for them at Shechem. Joshua wrote these things in the book of God's teachings. Then he took a large stone and set it under the oak tree at the Lord's holy place. Joshua told all the people, This stone will stand as a witness for us. It has heard all the words which the Lord spoke to us. It will stand as a witness for you. You cannot deceive your God. Then Joshua sent the people away, each to his own property. The deaths of Joshua and Eleazar. We knew this was coming, because after these events, the Lord's servant Joshua, son of Nun, died at 110 years old. He was buried on the own land at Timnath Serah in the mountains of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. Israel served the Lord as long as Joshua and the older leaders who outlived him and who knew everything the Lord had done for Israel were alive. Joseph's bones, which the people of Israel had brought from Egypt, were buried at Shechem. They were placed in the plot of ground Jacob had bought for the sons of Hamor, father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver. The plot was inherited by Joseph's descendants. Aaron's son Eleazar also died. He was buried on the hill that had been given to his son Phinehas in the mountains of Ephraim. Really solid summary of what went on. And now let's wrap this up with a nice little bow, shall we? Now that the land has been sufficiently conquered, the Transjordan tribes have fulfilled their promise to fight for the land with the other tribes. Joshua affirms them, reminds them to be loyal to Yahweh, spelled YHWH. Oh, please don't tell me I lost my mom's spot. Oh, that'd be a heartbreaker. I think we're okay. Stand by. Yeah, that's more accurate. There we go. My bad. Okay. Now that the land has been sufficiently conquered, the Transjordan tribes have fulfilled their promise to fight for the land with the other tribes. Joshua affirms them, reminds them to be loyal to Yahweh, and sends them home across the Jordan River to the east. On the way, they build a huge structure on the west side of the Jordan River. Where the western tribes hear about it, they're ready to fight. You can't just go building altars wherever you want. This seems to be in direct defiance of Yahweh's commands. They send a delegation headed up by Phinehas, son of Eleazar, and the high priest, and they accuse the Transjordan tribes of turning away from God. The western tribes fear God's judgment on all of Israel because of this rebellion. They ask for an explanation and offer the Transjordan tribes a gracious option for repentance. Come live with us on the western side of the river instead of turning away from God. But the Transjordan tribes clear things up quickly. It turns out they aren't rebelling against God or setting up an altar for worship. The structure is a monument to show the relationship between them and the western tribes, connecting them. They were afraid that in the future the western tribes would disown them and their kids, so they wanted something to serve as a sign of the relationship. The western tribes, they're reasonable, and they're satisfied with his explanation, so they head back home, breathing a sigh of relief, and the last thing that they want is to lose the land they just got settled in. As Joshua nears death, he calls all the leaders of Israel for a pep talk. God is the one who accomplished these good things for them, and there's still work to do, namely driving out lingering Canaanites. And Moses was very nervous about the Israelites turning away from God to worship the pagan gods. And here Joshua has the same concerns. This is like generations away. And God has equipped them with all they need to obey him. They can drive out the people because God has promised them that land. So they need to do it. Joshua warns against idolatry and intermarriage of those who don't worship Yahweh. If they fail to honor God in this, it breaks the covenant or promise, and he'll take the land away. God has blessed them, but harm will come to them if they turn away from him. Again, sounds harsh. Again, put yourself in those shoes for just a moment. In chapter 24, Joshua walks them through their history, beginning with Abraham's father, Terah. They all started out worshiping other gods. There was no such thing as an Israelite until God invented them. God grew them, rescued them, blessed them, fought for them, and fulfilled his promises to them. Then he says, you can serve Yahweh, or you can serve these other gods. What'll it be? The people responded with a hearty promise that they'll follow Yahweh. Joshua reminds them that they aren't capable of keeping that promise on their own. But they say they'll totally do it. Joshua is buried in the promised land, and the bones of Joseph, which had sat in Egypt for a few hundred years, in which they've been lugging around the wilderness. I forgot about that. And all through the promised land, finally find a resting place in a spot Joseph's dad bought hundreds of years earlier. And it happens to be in the plot of land God apportioned? Okay. For the tribes of Joseph. Full circle. We've been waiting for this since Genesis 50:25. Eleazar, the high priest, dies next. Since the priesthood is handed down generationally, his son Phinehas is primed to be the next high priest. But this signals the end of an era for the Israelites. Their current leader and high priest are dying on the same page. See, this helps me immensely as we just read all three of those chapters together, like being very cognizant of what's going on and thoughtful. And I need to see it like 3-4 times until it actually sticks in. So today's God shot, for the first time since God called Abraham, the people are living in at least partial fulfillment of all three of the promises he made to them. They become a great nation, they have a blessed relationship with Yahweh, and they're living in the promised land. Verse 14 of chapter 23 says, you know in your hearts and souls, all of you, that not one word has failed of all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you. All have come to pass for you, not one of them has failed. God hasn't failed. He wasn't failing them in the desert when these things hadn't yet been fulfilled, and he isn't failing them now. He's fail-proof, and he's where the joy is. So we are going to be moving on to Judges chapters 1 and 2, day 89 for tomorrow. So I plan on reading that on my own. Feel free to do that yourselves. I would like to get up, take a stretch break, and oh my gosh, why does escape not work for that? Bummer. When we come back, we will start on some dentistry now. We'll talk about Medicare and what it means for dentistry. There's a lot of stuff that I still don't understand about it. It can get really really messy. So let's I'm gonna run an ad break, and just so we're all on the same page, I'm never gonna run an ad if there's something going on screen. Ads are gonna be here to fill the time, and you're never gonna miss out on anything. So with that, I'll be back in about 3 minutes. What's up? Oh, oh, how many minutes am I late? How many minutes? Oh, jeez. Ah, jeez. That's on me. Hello, Boats. Bodhi, you want to say hi to everybody? You want to say hi? Come here, Bodhi. Come here. Come here. This is Bodhi. This is a family dog. Big old golden retriever poodle mix. So golden doodle. I love him very much. And my boy Archie, come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. There we go. And this is my boy Archie Bones Jones. Archibald Jones. I love him very much. Y'all probably see him more and more often on stream. And probably in some vids. Here you go, Papa. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Arch fan. Good boys. Good boys. No, 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 no. No treat. No treat. Not right now. Let's get some filler. Okay. Curious to why my bit rate also went down. Oh, right, my bit rate. That would make sense as to. How about I do that? I need to work on. There we go. Increase the bit rate, so that's probably going to make it so much. That's going to make it a little crisper. Give me a break. It's been 10 years. Alright. Let me do this off screen real quick. I don't know why the AGD, there we go. Their website must be just really slow at processing. Because it feels like I have to swap between the 3 different like storefronts that they have. Okay. There we go. And let's go to. Alright. Let's go to my learning center. How do we sync my purchases? Or does it just take forever for it to actually populate? Naturally. We'll go to the catalog again. And okay. Title. One of the required continuing education courses, it deals with CPR. Another one deals with pain management. And my biggest tip is you can use Tylenol and Advil together, and it is as effective as any opiate. It's kind of wild, Oh, what? Maybe that's it. Wants me to log in again? There you go. There we go. There we go. No, not finding CE. But I've used that combination for a lot of my patients, if not all my patients. And that helps out a majority of clinical problems. What I will push back on is, you know, not using it for difficult tooth removal. If you really gotta grind away some bone, I know, hey, it happens. However, that is when, all right, let's use some stronger stuff too. I think that's really important. Okay. There we go. Damn it. We already did. Okay, there we go. There's, you know, we're talking about that, right? Opiate addiction, pharmacology, and the dentist role. What if let's do that one instead, the Medicaid? I think if that's where I'm feeling like we need to be led on today. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, what happens a lot to either new providers, old providers, there are always going to be people who drug seek, and it sucks because these are so addictive. Sometimes it's really not their fault, and it takes a long time to wean yourself off of these incredibly strong drugs. Okay, let's go view cart. So I'm finding out the order of operations I have to do this. I was prepared this time. I did this all off stream. I was so prepared, and then I go in and check a second time, and it's just not there. I wonder if I'm curious as to why it takes this long. Okay. It decides to log me out. It looks like I can't place the order. I don't know. So, pain management, and that's incredibly what? Well, that's not a fun. Let me check receipts here on. Come on, you can. Okay. Got it. Cool, okay. So... Oh, navigating... Okay. It does take a while. Oh, okay, both of them hit the account. Okay, that's good. Let's go back to AGD. Education again? Management CE? No. Their website just feels unoptimized, unfortunately. Not a whole lot I can really do about that. I just gotta wait it out. Okay. Oh, oh. I'm really glad I caught that. If I forget, I'm gonna add tokens to everybody's account. So tokens got this idea from Grenader Jake. Really solid streamer. And I want to utilize these tokens, which you get one every 6 minutes you view. They're automatically added to your account. So you get 10 every hour. And I'm going to use those for raffles, for auctions, for what I like to plan on is providing a tutoring, like a live tutoring service on the platform. So if you've got questions or difficult problems, I'd love to work it out together. Or we can use them to suggest like what we learned in the dental, because Bible study can be focused later, but I want to finish the Bible in a year. I might need to go check what the pups are. I might need to go check what they're up to. Okay. How about? Yeah, it decides to log me in and log me out. Stand by. There we go. Well, I am so good boy. Good boy. Where's Archie? Where's Archie boy? Well, okay, Member Center. Let's go back to that. Live online learn. There we go. Good boys. See, recall. Huge. There we go. Good boys. Take it. Archie. Take it. Good boys. Okay, all done. All done. Very thankful for the recall that they have. This, oh my gosh, crucial. There we go. Okay, I just had to wait for these to. Cool. Here we go. All right. So we've got. I think this one's. Oh, part 1. Okay. There's a second part. I need to. We'll get to that. So, again, I'm totally fine with showing you the learning objectives, what's going on, but when it comes to the video feed itself, that's gotta do that, gotta show that, or gotta put that part off stream. You'll be able to listen to the audio still. If not, let me know. Okay. Very good. So.
You're not really from this like we from this. This right here is more than just music. It's a culture.
All right. So let me.
I was dead in a minute. I was a headache, so my head was beheaded. That's what I said in a medic. In the middle was
Very good. I do want to. Normally I should be able to. Okay, okay, okay. How do we do this? There we go. No. Info. This. Cool. Huge, huge. So now we can put this over here. There we go. I might just forego dual streaming, but I feel like it's necessary for now. So let's double check that.
Hello, and thank you for standing by. Welcome to AGD Opioid Addiction, Pharmacology, and the Dentist's Role in Responsible Prescribing, Part 1. During this presentation, participants are in a listen-only mode. The audio portion of the webinar streams through your computer speakers. If you are having trouble hearing, please check the volume settings on your speakers. If your video or your audio is playing poorly, you might be experiencing a bandwidth issue. Please try to refresh your screen or check your internet connection. At any time during this presentation, you may text a question or comment to the speaker using the Q&A box.
I can't make
Our
this
speaker
go
will
any
address
faster,
as many
but
questions as
this
possible
is great
during the presentation and at the end of the webinar. As a PACE-approved program provider, the AGD is required to monitor attendance throughout this webinar. This webinar will run for 1.5 hours. If you need to leave the webinar after the lecture portion of the webinar, you will be able to access the entire recording on your AGD CE portal login via the Centric Webinar profile found in the AGD Online Learning Center. As a reminder, this webinar provides 1.5 hours of lecture credit in AGD subject code 340, Anesthesia, Pain Management, Sedation, and Pharmacology. Today's webinar will be presented by Dr. James Rakowski, who earned his Bachelor's of Science from the Duquesne University School of Pharmacy, his Doctor of Dental Medicine from the University of Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine, and his PhD in Pharmacology Toxicology from Duquesne University. As an implant dentist, Dr. Rakowski enjoys restoring patients to a state of well-being and confidence in their ability to chew and smile. In addition, he lectures approximately 50 times per year at both research and dental conventions about bone grafting, surgical anatomy for implant dentistry, medical emergencies in the dental office, hormones and oral health, and women's hormonal issues. Dr. Rakowski, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be with everyone this evening, and I'm glad to see that we have so many people that have an interest in this topic, as the opioid crisis in America is way out of control and a major issue for all prescribers, as we have patients that we have to treat and keep comfortable as they go through that treatment, but also that we do not become an avenue for the illicit use of opioid medications that can lead to illicit use of drugs in many other aspects. I feel that this topic is so intense that I want to give you the opportunity to have access to these slides. I realize that you're going to have them through the AGD, but from my understanding is that sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get those up there. So I am making a PDF format of all the slides available to you that will be up there probably over after this weekend. And that is, if you'll go to www.rakowskiseminars.com/access, then if you'll fill in the required information, choose a username and password. And if you can, make sure you remember that username and password is that you'll be using it to access the slides for into the future. Fill in the course name, which will be the AGD webinar, and then go through the process of filling in the course access code, which will be AGD Part 1 2018. And note, this is all lowercase with no spaces. Again, AGD Part 1 2018. Once you've done that, click Submit, and the instructions for accessing the documents will be displayed on the screen and sent by email to you. If you are having trouble accessing the website or the slides, there's many other things on that website. So the various programs that I do, I always put up there. But if you do have problems, if you'll email Dustin@RutkowskiSeminars.com and let him know in that email that you are an AGD participant and what your problem is, and he will get back to you as soon as he can to help you gain access to those PDFs of the slides. Also, I want to make myself available to you if you do have questions that come up for you in the future on this topic. My email address is jamesrutkowski@me.com. And just as all of you get lots of emails, I get lots of emails. So if you email me and I don't get back to you within 2-3 days, don't be afraid to email me a second time. And in that subject line, put AGD participant, AGD webinar participant. And then if it's the second time you're emailing me, put second request if I didn't get back to you on the first. And if I still haven't gotten back to you, put third request. And if I still haven't done it, put like exclamation points and in big red letters, fourth request. I do my best to answer all emails, but as we all do, we get far too many emails and sometimes things fall through the cracks. So, but these are important emails to me. So if you need me, please do that. There is my office phone number, 814-226-8690. And if you call the office, you can let whomever answers the phone, Teresa or Jenny, that you're an AGD course participant and that you have a question. And make sure you give them phone numbers where I can reach you. And please let me know what time zone you're in so I don't end up calling you in the middle of the night because I'm on the East Coast and you're on the West Coast. Also, there's my mobile phone number, 803-415-4838. And I do answer that if I'm able to. Texting is a great way of getting in touch with me because I get far fewer texts than I do emails. But email or texting or the phone call works. And again, there's our website, www.rutkowskiseminars.com. I'd like to begin with an opioid crisis overview. I practice in Western Pennsylvania. I practiced in Western Pennsylvania since I got out of dental school in 1976. And I have since I'm semi-retired and I live 4 days a week in South Carolina, but I still practice 2.5 days a week in Western Pennsylvania. And Western Pennsylvania is in the grips of this opioid crisis, where we have all the problems that they talk about in Appalachia with decreased jobs. And so people become disengaged, they lose heart in what they're trying to do and whatnot. And so they turn to alcohol and drugs to pass the time away since they don't necessarily have gainful employment always. So this is a problem that's very dear to me in that I see it in our community. My practice, I write very, very few opioid prescriptions. In 2018, I have prescribed one opioid in which I gave a 3-day supply. I do not write opioid prescriptions on a routine basis, and we do a fair amount of surgeries since we are an implant-oriented practice, whether that be with implant placement, single implants, all on 4, 5s, or 6s, or bone grafting, whether it be in the sinus or lateral or vertical. But we can still get through these things without prescribing opioids for our patients. And our patients are not suffering. We don't have it as a major issue in our practice because I just do not see a need to write for opioids. And as we go through this program, this session 1, at the end, I'll give you kind of an outline of what the algorithm will be for pain management. Part 2, the next webinar that I'll be doing on this topic, I'll get into the very specifics with the prescribing and how we manage postoperative pain and discomfort in our practice.
You'll you'll hear this time and time and time again on what the ideal
more than
pain
115
management
Americans
is.
die after overdosing on opioids every day in America. Emergency room visits have gone up dramatically. They've quadrupled in the last 15 years, and they continue to rise. And the misuse of and the addiction to opioids, including not just the Vicodins, but also fentanyl and other opioids, is on the rise.
Mm-hmm.
The CDC estimates nearly half of all opioid overdoses started with prescription opioids.
Yeah.
So it's not just the heroin that we see out there, but it's these prescription drugs that they get from the dentist and from the physician. It can lead to dependence as well as addiction, the use of these drugs. And one thing for us to remember is that with as little as a 5-day use of prescription opioids, a patient can acquire dependence within 5 days. After 10 days of taking prescription opioids, 35% of the population taking those drugs will develop an addiction to it. And if we get beyond the 10 days, we get out 20, 30 days, that percentage of the population developing addiction goes up even higher. And this isn't just a lack of integrity or a personality flaw that patients have that become addicted to opioids. We're going to talk about the pharmacology of addiction and whatnot, and that it is something that is really out of the person's control. So the best thing to do is to never get started with it. And the best way never to get started with it is to have very limited access to these opioids.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are prescription opioids? They're a class of drugs naturally found in the opium poppy. So there's naturally occurring ones, such as codeine, and that's made directly from the plant. But there are other ones, synthetics like oxycodone and hydrocodone, that have the same chemical structures than naturally occurring opioids, but they are synthetically made. And opioids are often used because they contain chemicals that not only relieve pain, but they relax the body. And that's where it's really fooling with the chemistry of the central nervous system and of the body. And that's how ones can develop dependence upon them as well as addiction to them, much easier than what we would like to have it be. Now, prescription opioids are used mostly to treat moderate to severe pain, not minor pain. And we are so fortunate as dentists to be practicing dentistry in that we're usually dealing with minimal pain. I'm not saying that we don't occasionally have moderate to severe pain, and we're going to talk about that as we go along. But these medications are also used to treat coughs and dry diarrhea. They make people feel very relaxed and high, which is why they are used for non-medical reasons. They can be highly addictive, and overdoses and death are common. Every 12 minutes, there is another person in America that dies from a prescription opioid overdose in America, every 12 minutes. So while we're on this webinar for the next 90 minutes, there will be 7 to 8 people in the United States who die from a prescription opioid overdose. And many times that the prescription opioid use leads to the use of heroin, which is one of the world's most dangerous opioids. And unfortunately, heroin many times is less expensive or easier to come by for a patient that is addicted to it and looking to get that fix, that they can actually go out and buy heroin for less money and have greater access to heroin than they can to a prescription opioid. The common prescription opioids are hydrocodone, Vicodin, or oxycodone, OxyContin, or Percocet, oxymorphone, Opana, morphine, codeine, fentanyl, and the popular slang terms for these are oxy, perks, Vikes.
So I thought all of those names were for all different things. I also used to be the one who I just get all this stuff mixed up. So hydrocodone, the brand name Vicodin, oxycodone, which is Oxycontin and Percocet. So that's kind of in its own little descriptor. Oxymorphone, very similar to hydrocodone, oxycodone, just different isomers, different like small changes in the chemistry of it. And then you get morphine, and then codeine, fentanyl, which is, you've probably heard a lot about fentanyl in the past like 10 years, the rise of fentanyl and how street drugs get laced with this stuff. It's incredibly potent. It's incredibly dangerous. And yes, oxy perks, and I don't hear Vikes as the slang, but that just for clarification.
And whatever else is the sellers on the street can get the attention of the people to go ahead and sell these drugs to them. People will misuse prescription opioids by taking it away or a dose other than what was prescribed. In other words, we prescribed it as take 1 or 2 every 6 hours is needed for pain, but they may find that they go ahead and they take it more frequently than that, or that they're taking it even if they're not having pain. They may also be taking someone else's prescription medicine. Maybe they had a family member that saw the physician at the dentist and was prescribed more than what they should have been prescribed, and that may be more than a 3-day supply. So they may have been prescribed, 20, 30, 40, 50. I had one report of an individual that had wisdom teeth removed, and their son was given a prescription for 50 PreDent tablets, which is just in excess of what should be needed for that type of procedure.
Smokes. Yeah.
They take the medication for something other than what it was intended for, the prescription was intended for, and that is it may be just to get high, simply to get high because it makes the body relaxed, it makes them feel good, it makes them euphoric, and we'll get into the pharmacology of that. It gives them a warm feeling, it gives them the buzz that so many times people will talk about when they take these medications.
The pharmacology is
a person can swallow
really
medicine in its normal form, or they may take and crush the pills or open the capsules up and dissolve that powder in water and inject that solution into the vein. And they may also snort the powder from those tablets or those capsules. Now, opioids have the ability to do 2 things, many things: control pain and control diarrhea and control cough, but they can cause dependence, and that is a physical phenomenon. And that's where the patient will experience withdrawal symptoms if they stop taking the medication. So I've been on the medication for 5 days, and my pain from my root canal or my tooth extraction or my crown and bridge procedure, Paris surgery, dental implant procedure is minimal at this point in time. But I'm finding I'm a little jittery today, okay? I'm a little tense, I'm a little irritable today. And that's a sign of physical dependence to these drugs. And almost all patients will experience this after 5 to 10 days of treatment. That's physical dependence. Then we can move into addiction, and that's psychological. And in addiction, the patient will feel compulsion to go ahead and take the medication regardless of the financial, social, or psychological ramifications. In other words, I've got to get up and go to work in the morning. But boy, if I just feel that I want to go ahead and take some of this tonight, and maybe I wake up at 2 in the morning and I take some more of it, and so that there's the risk that I will not be at my best at work tomorrow, so that could have financial consequences, or that I may oversleep. If my family, if my children, if my wife, my spouse, knew that I was taking these medications, I would be shunned. I'm just not my normal self when I take these medications. But in addiction, you don't care about any of those things. You don't care about your job. You don't care about your friends and your family, and you don't care how it makes you look or how it makes you feel, that it can be noticeable to other people possibly. And as I said earlier, 35% of the patients reach this opioid use disorder after 5 days of therapy. Usually at 10 days, for sure, 35% of the people. And beyond 10 days, it goes beyond that 35%. Now, this line, we'd like to see it as a definitive line here. And it's not. It becomes blurred, where some people, because of their personality or other problems or other issues they've had in the past or that they're currently going into, they may find that they go into addiction in a much slower period of time or much faster period of time or slower period of time. So it's not a distinct line of 5 days and 10 days, but it can merge between those two sites. Addicted patients who stop using opioids can have severe withdrawal symptoms that begin as early as a few hours after the last drug dose was taken. In other words, once that drug gets beyond 1 to 2 half-lives, and we'll just say that most likely the half-life of the drug is 4 to 6 hours. So if they miss a dose at 4 hours or 6 hours, it's not so bad, 1 half-life. But at that 8 to 12 hours, many times these symptoms will begin appearing. And once they get out 4 to 5 half-lives beyond the last dose, these symptoms can be rather severe for them. And that can be muscle and bone pain, sleep problems, diarrhea and vomiting, cold flashes with goosebumps, uncontrollable leg movements, severe cravings, muscle pain that is just unbelievable for them, and the cravings for food, for alcohol, for more drug, and that can begin as early as missing the drug and being out 2 or more half-lives. More people are addicted to prescription opioids in the United States than there are people addicted to heroin and cocaine combined.
Yeah, it's just so
we often think of heroin and cocaine as being a major issue in the United States, and it certainly is a major issue. But I think if we stop and realize that there are more people addicted to prescription opioids, that brings to light for us how important it is for us as prescribers to really make sure we need to be giving a prescription for an opioid. I'm not against prescribing opioids when they are needed.
Neither am I.
Fortunately, most times in dentistry, opioids are not needed, and I will go through with you how that will can be achieved without using opioids and still keeping your patients comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, as I mentioned before, prescription opioids can lead to addiction because the repeated misuse of prescription opioids can lead to substance use disorder, SUD. And SUD ranges from mild to severe and from temporary to chronic. And addiction is the most severe form of the SUD. And substance abuse disorder develops when the continued misuse of the drug changes the brain, and it actually does change the cells, the receptors that are on the cells, the mu receptors that are in the brain. They actually change the intercellular components of them, and that changes everything. It makes the craving for the drug, and it causes health problems and failure to meet responsibilities at work, school, and at home. Prescription opioids and heroin are chemically similar, and they can produce this similar highs. And as I mentioned, heroin is often cheaper and easier to come by than a prescription opioids. And 80% of Americans using heroin, including those that are in treatment for heroin addiction, reported starting by misusing prescription opioids prior to their use of heroin and their addiction to heroin. So again, we play an important part of this as we are one of the many gatekeepers there are to prescription opioids access for patients. And can pregnant patients take prescription opioids? Well, patients using prescription opioids when pregnant can lead to the baby developing dependence and have withdrawal symptoms after birth. This is referred to as neonatal abstinence syndrome, and which can be treated. But the use during pregnancy can also lead to miscarriage and low birth weight. So birth complications, as well as having a child born that is already addicted to the opioids. And again, we just have to be careful of whom we're prescribing these to. I personally will never give a pregnant woman a narcotic without consultation with the pregnant lady, significant others in her family, as well as her obstetrician. Can a person overdose on a prescription opioid? And yes, an overdose occurs when a patient uses enough of the drug to produce life-threatening symptoms of death. And patients who take these drugs, they start off, they get a buzz at a very low dose. But as they continue to use the drug, they develop a tolerance. And when they develop that tolerance to it, to get the same buzz, and I'll show this in the pharmacology, they have to take additional drug. And so that's how they get into an overdose situation. When a patient's overdose of an opioid medication, the breathing slows or stops, and the slowed or stopped breathing decreases the amount of oxygen that reaches the brain, which results in coma, permanent brain damage, or death. Is it possible to treat an opioid overdose? And the answer is yes. If you realize that you're with somebody that is experiencing an opioid overdose, the most important step to take immediately is to call 911 so he or she can receive immediate medical attention. Upon arrival of the medical team, naloxone, an antagonist, is administered. And the naloxone can treat the opioid overdose when given immediately. And it does so by binding rapidly to the opioid receptor and therefore blocking the effects of the opioid medications. So you block that mu receptor, and that keeps the opioid from landing on that receptor. The problem is that naloxone traditionally has a shorter half-life than do the opioids. And when you have the shorter half-life of naloxone than the opioid, that the naloxone will wear off and the person can go back into an overdose situation. So these patients must be monitored to be assured that they're not going back into an overdose situation. Naloxone is available in an injectable solution known as Narcan. It's also available as a handheld auto-injector and as a nasal spray.
Nasal spray is going to be
some states actually allow pharmacists to dispense naloxone without a prescription, so that if they have a patient that should come into the pharmacy, or a family member or a friend that comes into the pharmacy and says that they have an individual who is experiencing an overdose, that they can go ahead and give them naloxone so it can be administered immediately. Of course, they do need to call 911 and get qualified medical personnel there. But by having naloxone available without a prescription, it enables friends, families, and others in the community to use the auto-injector and nasal spray versions of the naloxone to save someone who is overdosing. So if there's a family member that they know has an addiction to a opioid, that the pharmacist can give that family member or friend the naloxone for them to administer at home should they come across their friend or family member in an overdose situation.
Yeah.
The alternatives for treating addiction are medications. New medications are being developed to help with the withdrawal process. And the FDA has approved something called NSS2 bridge that can help ease the withdrawal symptoms. And it's a small electrical nerve stimulator that's placed behind the patient's ear and stimulates them, and such decreases the withdrawal symptoms that the patient can be having. And it can be used for up to 5 days during the acute withdrawal phase. And it also has, the FDA has approved lofexidine, and it's a non-opioid medication designed to reduce opioid withdrawal symptoms. So it lands on the receptors, but it doesn't give the opioid actions, agonist actions that the opioid does.
Okay, that's a new one.
These three medications work by binding to some opioid receptors in the brain, as the opioid medicines do. And that these three medications are buprenorphine and methadone. They reduce the cravings and withdrawal symptoms. And naltrexone, which blocks the opioid receptors and prevents the opioid drugs from having an effect. So the first two there, they just reduce the cravings and the withdrawal symptoms. And the naltrexone, it blocks the opioid receptors and prevents those drugs from having their effect on the patient. So there are other ways of helping those patients as they go through withdrawal, not just in treating the overdose. Behavioral therapies for addiction to prescription opioids help patients modify their attitudes and behaviors related to drug use, increase healthy lifestyle skills, and persist with other forms of treatment, the medication. So that not only do you take the medication, but then they like you to get into behavioral therapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps modify the patient's drug use, their expectations, behaviors, and manage the triggers and stresses. Because as with anything that's addicting, there are triggers that will set the patient off in that direction and give them the craving to go ahead and take the drug. Now, they'll rationalize, why shouldn't I take this drug? It makes me feel good. And in pharmacology, we're going to show you why it makes that patient feel good. Prescription opioids are used to treat moderate to severe pain. Though some of the opioids can be used to treat coughing and diarrhea. And as we've mentioned before, they do this, they misuse these drugs by using them ways other than what they're prescribed for, using another person's prescription, using it just to get high, and then crushing the tablets, emptying the capsules, and injecting it or snorting the drugs. So points for us to remember are that opioids bind to and then activate opioid receptors on cells located in the brain, spinal cord, and other organs in the body. They can induce feelings of pleasure, and opioids can reinforce the act of taking the drug, making the user want to repeat that experience all over again. If I can just get one more drug, I'll just do it one more time. Is what they rationalize in their own brain, is to, I just need to feel better. I'm having a bad day. I just need to feel better. And so this is a disease state. This just isn't a personality flaw. Once you start taking these drugs, you can be on the slippery path. So we need to be careful of when we prescribe these, how much we're prescribing, and to whom we're prescribing these drugs. They induce relaxation and happy emotions, but they can also induce drowsiness, confusion, nausea, constipation, slow breathing. So operating motor vehicles while taking these drugs or doing things that require a great deal of alertness compromises that individual and should not be done while they are taking these drugs. They have effects similar to heroin, and prescription opioid misuse is a risk factor for starting heroin use. Only a small fraction of people who misuse opioid pain relievers switch to heroin, but the fact remains 80% of the people that are on heroin started with prescription opioids. Your patients can overdose on prescription opioids, and in those situations, naloxone can treat an opioid overdose when given immediately. And prescription opioid use, even when prescribed, can lead to a substance use disorder, an SUD, which can lead to addiction in severe cases. Dependence and addiction withdrawal symptoms, including muscle and bone pain, sleep problems, diarrhea, vomiting, and severe craving. And treatment of the addiction, not the overdose, but the addiction includes medications and behavioral therapies. So here's just a chart with some of the drugs that we see that we prescribe. Codeine, and the street names are Captain Cody, Lean, Purple, doors and fours, loads, pancakes and syrup. Some of the doctors who do sedation in their office, moderate sedation or deep sedation, will have fentanyl in their office, and they have to be protective of it. And that is the Apache, China Girl, China White, Dance Fever, and hydrocodone and dihydrocodone, Vicodin, is referred to as Fike. Hydromorphone, Dilaudid, is footballs, juice, smack, Demerol, which is not used much anymore outside of a hospital setting, and then even there its use is diminished tremendously. Are demis and painkiller, and methadone, referred to as chocolate chip cookies.
A lot of these
morphine, again, those that do sedation in their office may have this in their office.
I don't expect myself to know that,
referred to as monkey and white stuff.
Right?
Oxycodone, the Percodan, Percocets, referred to as Oxy, and Perks, and oxymorphone, referred to as biscuits. So now that we kind of have an overview, and hopefully we can all appreciate what a severe problem this is in America at this point in time, I want to take a look at what do the stats say about opioid abuse.
The epidemic is getting worse. In 45 states, emergency room visits for overdoses are up 30%, and there are virtually no signs of it getting better. Here's Dean Reynolds.
According to the Centers for Disease Control, the nation is in the grip of a fast-moving epidemic for which there are no easy solutions. Illinois is one of the hardest-hit states, with nearly a 66% increase in suspected opioid overdose visits to the ER last year. Dr. Tom Scaletta is an emergency room physician in Naperville, Illinois, where they treated 500 opioid-dependent patients last year.
You see the carfentanil and the fentanyl, as well as heroin, and yep, we see a little bit of everything.
Increases in other states across the nation are even more alarming. Wisconsin up 108%, Pennsylvania 80%, Delaware almost 105% in suspected overdoses treated in emergency rooms. Dr. Ann Schuchat is acting director of the CDC.
We saw increases in every geographic region, increases in men and women, increases in all adult age groups.
So the opiate epidemic is still problematic. It is getting better. As providers, we are getting more savvy with how people seek drugs, seek these out. We're trying to break the stigma of, oh, you have to have opiates in order to feel pain relief. It's not true. There are a lot of times where the mind can go over the matter, and that can be said for a lot of things, but you have so much more control over your body than you give yourself credit for, and it takes a lot of discipline. I'm not saying that you don't have to take any sort of pills, or like I get migraines almost weekly now. It's partially genetic. It's partially due to my prescription for my eyes. It is stress. It's a multitude of factors, right? If I feel it coming on, I definitely need to take something to help it wean off. Like it is the major issue is the dilation of the blood vessels in your head, and you don't have a whole lot of space up here, so you're feeling that constant pressure over and over, and it can affect your eyesight, it can affect your mood, your overall sense of being, your balance. There's so much that goes into it. So pain relievers are not inherently bad. It is just how they are used, what are used, and I had a procedure done to move my jaw forward. I had 3 sets of braces at this point. I had 2 palatal expanders. If you know what the lock and key is on the roof of your mouth, you're with me. After all that time, I still needed surgery to correct my smaller upper jaw to my lower jaw, or else we were going to run into problems. I was on hydrocodone, one of the very first medicines we had talked about in today's lesson. For a couple of days, it was great. I felt relaxed. The pain was gone, but I definitely started to feel a difference in my mood, and my girlfriend, now wife my girlfriend at the time, now wife, also started to notice it. And I just could not take the hydrocodone anymore. I was really fortunate. I'm very thankful and fortunate that I think it was at like the 2-week mark, I just stopped taking it. And all the while, I wasn't sewn shut. It wasn't my lower jaw that needed any corrective surgery. This was what's called a maxillary Lafort. And so the maxillary is the upper jaw. And what they did was literally put me to sleep with proper anesthetics, and had me under to perform the surgery with an oral surgeon, a team to monitor my vitals, and everything else in between. After signing, 9 pages of "this could happen to you if things go wrong" paper, like there's always a chance. There's always a risk in any surgery. And as a dentist, pretty much anything you do with a handpiece is technically a surgery. So with that in mind, the doctor knew how extensive it was, because not only was I getting this massive surgery to move my jaw like 4 millimeters, that's not a whole lot. The tip of this pen, right? Tip of this pen is, what is it, 0.7. So the very, very tip of that is 0.7 millimeters. 4 times that is like right in between here, like that much to move my jaw so that I wasn't hitting my teeth edge to edge, right? I have metal plates in here to keep everything in place. They sewed me back up, and I needed to be on an all smoothie diet for, oh my gosh, 8 months. And I love her so much, but she made me laugh throughout that entire period so many times. I thought I was going to lose stitches. That was gonna be problematic, and I'll still give her grief about that every once in a while. But going back to the opiates, I could not do it. I just couldn't. I wish I don't know what I wish. It's huh. Let me check opiates. Did we drop a lot of frames? We did spike down there a little bit. My apologies. I think with the spam bot that came in. Yeah, we're dunking down. It happens, spikes. So with the opiates that I was on after the major surgery, I could not I couldn't handle being on the opiates. I think it was even giving me stomach problems, if I remember correctly. Yeah, okay, part of it could be due to I had to have smoothies as a diet entirely. So, sure. But I am very fortunate to not have had the addictive person the addictive disorder. I have an addictive personality on many other things. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so close to buying so many Beyblades. I'm getting off track here. This is how I am. And I'm somehow not ADHD. Go figure. But with opiates, I've been very fortunate to not have to seek them out. I'm not addicted to them. I don't miss them in any way, shape, or form. And this surgery was literally a decade ago when I was originally streaming. How fitting. So with that, we'll take a pause. Going to take a stretch break. We'll run 3 minutes of ads. I'm going to go let the dogs out. And I will see you all back here in a few moments. Much love, y'all. Hey, Papa's. Who goes high? What's goes high? What's goes high? Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Come on. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. How'd I do that time? How bad? How much time? Yeah, okay. Better. We'll take that. Dogs are taken care of. Man, I miss yogurt. It's it's been difficult to want to go back to having or like wanting smoothies. I mean, can you blame me? Bodhi, you're so smart, dude. He's like hang on. If I can turn this back on real quick. Bodhi, lovable boy. He's so after I finish the yogurt, I'll give Archie and Bodhi the lid. Archie gets the lid because he's 35-pound pupper, and Bodhi will get the little cup. Bodhi, 9 times out of 10, will go and bring it to a corner of the wall and just like hold it, but sometimes he'll just and rotate it in his mouth. It's A1 pup. A1. Beautiful. I love him so much. I'm still getting used to utilizing a proper camera as a second capture device. I did it with an iPhone before, and it was cool, but you had to use like software, and it would take forever. It would buffer, and honestly, this is great where I don't have to worry about recording, but I think it falls asleep after some time. But if I hit record, then not only is it burning the battery, it's using up storage, which there are times I will want to use that, but I don't. Yeah, see, it'll do that. But if I hit record, right? I hit record. Is it not gonna? Huh. I don't know. I feel like I've hit record like 3 different times. Oh. It is. But it's not showing up on the right-hand corner. Forgive me, chat. Forgive me, chatters. Oh, the boy. Oh. Look at him. Good boy, Bodhi. Okay, we've still got some time left on this CE course. Any point in time you guys need clarification on something that's being presented, please pose a question. This is meant to be not only of edification for myself, for you as well. Let's continue.
According to the CDC, overdoses kill about 5 people every hour across the U.S.
The potency and toxicity of what's on the street is very high right now. And so we think there probably is not an increase in people using drugs, but there's an increase in the danger associated with a single use.
Erin Weiner is the Director of Addiction Services at Linden Oaks Behavioral Health.
We know that up to 90% of people will relapse in the first year going through rehab. It's a very difficult problem, and particularly for opioids. The biological pull is very strong.
Do you expect it to get worse?
I hope not. But there is little sign that the opioid epidemic is slowing down, and emergency rooms across the country are bracing for another night of frantic efforts to keep the victims alive. Dean Reynolds, CBS News, Naperville, Illinois.
That's pretty disturbing when we stop and hear the number of ER visits and whatnot. And in 2016, 42,249 people died of an opioid overdose. And that's more than 115 people every 24 hours dying from an opioid overdose. And that slide says every 12 seconds. That's one person dies every 12 minutes. Nearly half of all these opioid-related deaths, 46 each day, involved a prescription opioid. So it's an epidemic. It's something that we all have to take serious. We all have ourselves and family members who can be subject to this. This is not with just one class of people or one group of people, whether that be race, nationality, marital status, educational. It transcends all boundaries. And many times it starts out with that the opioid was given to treat pain. And 20% of the patients presenting to the physician's office with non-cancer pain symptoms or pain-related diagnoses, including acute and chronic pain, receive an opioid prescription. In 2012, the healthcare providers wrote 259 million prescriptions for opioid pain medication, enough for every adult in the United States to have a bottle of pills in their medicine cabinet of a prescription opioid. We have to do a better job of prescribing these only when they are needed to be prescribed, and that includes physicians and dentists as well. Pain physiology. Pain, we think of it as something as bad, but it's not always bad because it is a vital sign force. Pain has a survival value. It lets us know when something is wrong. If you're in an accident and you break your leg, you need to have pain in that leg so that the physician can go ahead and take an x-ray, know where to take that x-ray. Or if you go to the dentist, you've got that tooth is hurting, it's telling you there's something wrong so that they can examine it and take an x-ray if need be, do whatever, pulp test it, do whatever is needed, get to the source of that problem and solve that problem before it becomes a major issue for you. It lets us know when something is wrong. It points to that specific body part that needs attention. And opioids are not the only way to control pain. There is a lot of pressure on us prescribers to control all pain and make it non-existent.
Yeah.
When we just need to make the pain controllable, because the culture of pain medicine is, from the patient standpoint, is that it's to relieve all pain. I shouldn't be having any pain. I don't take pleasure in any of my patients having any pain whatsoever, and I will do everything I can to minimize it. And we certainly can, with the appropriate algorithms, minimize that pain, which again, I'll be getting into at the very end of this session. And the next session is dedicated to that entirely. But we have to let patients know that their expectations to have a pain-free post-operative procedure is not really realistic, that there will be a little bit of discomfort. You did have these wisdom teeth removed. You did have a maxillary or mandibular ONA. You did have a bone graft done. You did have a root canal done. You did have extensive crown and bridge done. There's bound to be some discomfort there, and that you shouldn't expect there to be none. We'll do our best to minimize it. The purpose of pain medication is to control pain, make it tolerable, not eradicate it. And I think that's something that as clinicians, we like to think of how wonderful it is if we can have a patient get through something without any pain at all. But that's really an unfair expectation upon ourselves put on by ourselves and put onto us by patients as well. Now, chronic pain is defined within these guidelines that we're going to be talking about here over the next hour remaining here as pain that typically lasts greater than 3 months or past the time of normal tissue healing. Now, we're pretty fortunate that in dentistry, most all pain that we induce or cause with our treatment is gone in 3 to 5 days, and at the outset, 7 days, and at the very outset, 10 days. But it's still possible to manage that pain without opioids or just maybe an initial opioid use for the first 1, 2, 3 days. Now, what is pain? It's sensory and emotional. There's acute pain, which is short-term, chronic pain, which persists after the normal healing process occurs, and recurrent pain. That's where it's gone, but we're back here again, and the pain has returned for us. When you have a patient that you're treating for chronic pain, and I realize in dentistry, some of our practices are designed to treating those patients that have TMJ or myofascial pain dysfunctions. When you have chronic pain, it's always good to use a team approach where you have another clinician, you have a second pair of eyes on that patient, and that may be a physician or a dentist that works just with pain patients. So it's always good to have somebody else involved in it, and do not take on the burden, this responsibility of dealing with this chronic pain all unto yourself. It's nothing to be ashamed of asking to have another clinician give their opinion or to be in the co-treaters for a patient who has chronic pain, because we may miss something, and we are all just human. It's not admitting a flaw in ourselves, but it's being realistic in that we don't necessarily know and see all things that a second pair of eyes wouldn't lend some aid to us in these things. But also, the patient must be willing to engage and be a responsible partner in their treatment. In other words, tell me about this pain. Is it just the drugs you need, or is it the pain? How bad is this pain? Are you doing the things that we're asking you to do? Are you doing the exercises that you're supposed to be doing? Are you taking your NSAID as you should be taking it? Are you staying ahead of the pain? Are you keeping your appointments regularly? If the patient does not step up, then do not treat the patient. Dismiss that patient from your practice. This is a mutual responsibility. We have, as clinicians, the responsibility to treat this patient adequately, professionally, thoroughly, evaluating that patient thoroughly. But that patient has the responsibility of being honest and truthful with us and letting us know completely what's going on, and also following through in the recommendations that we give that patient.
Yes, they do.
Now, I don't want to go too deep into this pain stimuli, but I think we do need to give a little bit of background for what it is, in that we have free nerve endings that have nociceptors on them. Those are pain sensing receptors on nerve endings. They're peripherally activated in response to tissue damage, whether that's just taking the handpiece and grinding on the tooth, hitting the pulp, exposed root structure, whatever. Locally, there's an interplay between the various surrounding structures, including the blood vessels and mast cells, leading to inflammation, and that inflammation then further aggravates that pain for us. The release of histamine and cytokine activity in the face of the mast cell degranulation can sensitize other nerve endings to the area of insult and just make the patient's pain worse for them. The plasma components, such as the platelets and products of the surgically damaged cells, also contribute to the release of neuroactive substances involved in the peripheral sensitization and hyperalgesia. So when we've done surgery, they're even more sensitive than they would be otherwise because of the debris from the surgical and the movement in of platelets and all the growth factors and cytokines involved in platelets. These neuroactive substances initiate first-order neuron stimulation, and first-order neurons are those that are up to the spinal cord. The stimuli are transmitted via first-order neurons to the dorsal horn neurons of the spinal cord, and they vary in width and composition. There's the A fibers and the C fibers. they go to the spinal cord, they release neurotransmitters, they transmit the sensory information to the dorsal horn neurons of the spinal cord. Then from the spinal cord, we move into the central nervous system. And I'm not going to put you through these slides. You'll be able to read them on your own there. As I'm going to move on to the pharmacology and the other things we need to know for our state requirements of how we prescribe these things. But pain is complex. It is at this sophisticated supraspinal level in the central nervous system that such factors as anxiety, depression, fear, and learned behavior exert their influences on the phenomena of perceived pain. So it becomes very complex at any site, but particularly once it's in the central nervous system. And pain transmission in the head is similar to transmission in the spinal cord. Distinct differences do exist, and the sensory nociception is disproportionately greater in the head and oral cavity when compared with other parts of the body. So we have more pain sensation in the oral cavity than we have in our legs. The application of the sensory transmissions revolves from the speech, taste, and masticatory functions. And cranial nerves 5, 7, 9, and 10 relay the sensory information to the trigeminal ganglion. So when we have this pain, the pharmacological interventions that we have are that when we have membrane phospholipids, which are released, that's when we pick our scalpel up and we cut that soft tissue, we grind on that tooth, we hit that pulp. The cell membranes are made up of phospholipids. Those phospholipids are released from that membrane when it's damaged, and they are acted upon by something called phospholipase A2. Now, phospholipase A2 takes these phospholipids from the cell membrane and organizes them into something called arachidonic acid. When we use glucocorticosteroids, and I'm going to talk about using those at length at our next visit, this is where the steroids work. They block the action of phospholipase A2 on these freed phospholipids and prevent the formation of arachidonic acid. Now, nothing is 100%. We never block 100% of the arachidonic acid, but we can reduce this arachidonic acid by administering steroids. Now, the human body naturally every day puts out steroids, and when it becomes under stress, it gives increased levels of glucocorticosteroids, and those increased levels of glucocorticosteroids oftentimes will block the arachidonic acid. But as patients age, their response to putting out more cortisol, glucocorticosteroids, diminishes with time, so we may find that we have to supplement that patient with steroids when we do our procedures that reduce inflammation, such as surgical procedures. For the arachidonic acid that is formed, it gets acted upon by either COX-1, COX-2, or lipooxygenase. And each of these enzymes will do different things. COX-1 usually makes things that are protective for the human body. COX-2 will make the inflammatory prostaglandins that will lead to pain and tenderness for us. And the lipooxygenases, they lead to the formation of leukotrienes. And we'll talk a great deal about that at our next visit. But just know this, we're going to focus on preventing that pain for us eventually by using steroids and NSAIDs. And then I started to say we also have a COX-3, which is in the brain, and that's where acetaminophen works. So if we use our pain algorithms that rely on NSAIDs and acetaminophen and the occasional use of a glucocorticosteroid, we're actually blocking the pain from forming for us or being there. Where when you give an opioid, all you're doing is you are altering the patient's response to that pain. We're not necessarily blocking that pain cascade. We may be blocking some of the pain sensory sensations in the central nervous system for us, but we're pretty much altering and producing a psychological state where the patient doesn't care about as much about having the pain as they do otherwise.
Yeah.
I want to spend a little bit of time talking about opioid pharmacology with you now. And half of the action of the opioid medication is to treat the psychological pain, the physiologic pain that is there. But the remaining half is to treat the psychological aspect of it, and that is to create a state of euphoria where the patient doesn't really care that they're having pain. And therein lies the pathway to tolerance and addiction. So half of what you're giving that opioid for is to treat the physiologic pain, but the other half is to deal with the psychology of it and creating a state of well-being and euphoria for that patient. I think this video explains the pharmacology for us well. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Opioids refer to a class of drugs that act via opioid receptors and exert their effects by binding to opioid receptors in the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. In the brain, they also increase dopamine release, producing euphoric effects. Opioid analgesics, such as morphine and fentanyl, mimic the action of endogenous opioids. They are powerful painkillers and are commonly used to manage severe pain. Continuous use, however, may lead to tolerance and dependence. Opioids slow down breathing, and overdose can be fatal. Their psychoactive effects also make them common drugs of abuse, with morphine being particularly susceptible to addiction. Heroin, a semi-synthetic product made from morphine, is another drug that is highly popular among recreational users. Once administered, it is metabolized into morphine and 6-monoacetylmorphine, both of which are psychoactive. Heroin is rarely used in medicine. Dopamine neurotransmitter is at the basis of the brain reward pathway. Engaging in enjoyable activities causes dopamine release from dopamine-producing neurons into the synaptic space, where it binds to and stimulates dopamine receptors on the receiving neuron. This stimulation is believed to produce the pleasurable feelings or rewarding effect. Normally, GABA, another neurotransmitter, inhibits dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens. By binding to receptors on GABA inhibitory neurons, opioids reduce GABA's activity, ultimately increase dopamine release, and induce pleasurable feelings. Continued use of opioids can result in dependence and addiction. As the body gets used to euphoric effects of the drug, it may become irritated if drug use is reduced or discontinued. Tolerance develops following a typical sequence of events. A drug exerts its effect by increasing or decreasing a certain substance or activity in the brain to an abnormally high or low level. Repeated exposure maintains this abnormal level for a period of time. The brain eventually adapts by pulling it back to normal level. This means the drug at the current dosage no longer produces the desirable psychoactive effect. A higher dose is required to do so. This vicious cycle repeats itself and eventually leads to drug overdose.
So the process of addiction, it's just a pharmacological principle, and the development of tolerance are pharmacological principles that if we take the opioid, we block the release of GABA, which is the brake for too much dopamine being released. We take off that brake by taking the opioid. Now we can get all the dopamine release that we want. We get the feeling that we're really feeling good. We really feel great with it. But as time goes on, the number of receptors will either desensitize or internalize in that postsynaptic neuron. So now we're not getting the same buzz, and we have to take more of the drug to get what we need. And the more the drug you take, unfortunately, you do not develop tolerance to the same degree or at the same speed to toxicity and respiratory depression as you do to the euphoric feelings. So you've developed a tolerance to the euphoric feelings. You've got a addiction to that euphoric feeling, but so you need to take more of the drug, but you take the same amount of the drug, you don't get the buzz any longer, so you take more drug, but you're going to get more respiratory depression because you haven't developed the tolerance with the respiratory depression to the same degree. And so it's just pharmacological, physiologic principles. And if a person takes opioids long enough, they will. We were taught in the 80s and 90s that if you truly had pain, you couldn't develop